announcement on the continent. So a fair amount to come on the show from now right until 10 a.m. But right now we're going across to be joined by Pakistan-based journalist Jahanzeb Hussain. Jahanzeb, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and
Assalamu
welcome to
alaikum.
the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we looked at Imran Khan, and obviously, he is in the aftermath of him being removed as the prime minister of the country, and he's basically been trying to keep the country together. And the latest developments we've heard, where he's mentioned in the Jhelum jalsa, talking about the PTI still featuring prominently together with the Pakistan army in keeping Pakistan together.
Well, he said that, but I mean that's the way he sees himself and his role in the country's politics. But of course, the reality always is very different than what the politicians think it is. So I mean, it is the jalsa that he had is latest in the series of protests and rallies that he has organized since, as you said, he was ousted from power. And their next plan is to march to the capital, Islamabad, and he plans to bring out at least 2 million people. He says to the capital in order to protest what he sees was a wrongful ouster from power. So that's the context that we are operating in. And his remark on the army is a response to the criticism that he has received that him and his supporters have been very vocal in criticizing the army for its role in his ouster. But the fact that he has to come out and say that he is criticizing the current civilian government and praises the army for keeping Pakistan together just reflects on how important it is for everyone to stay on side when it comes to the army and not cross certain red lines when it comes to public discourse regarding the army's role. So it's just a reflection of where the center of power is in Pakistan and how politicians have to adapt to it.
Yes, and politicians will be politicians, but also looking at, as you mentioned, crossing certain red lines, and we know that the army plays a vital role in Pakistan, and whether it's Imran Khan or whether it's going to be under Shahbaz Sharif. But it's interesting how the politicians have been using the army, and to the extent that even Imran Khan in this Jalsa spoke about. Nawaz Sharif. He spoke about Maryam Nawaz speaking against the army, and it does appear that everybody wants to stay at the right side of the Pakistani army.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone has to because everybody knows that the kingmaker in the country is the Pakistani army. And whoever comes to power has to be on the right side, and whoever wants to stay in power has to be on the right side, and whoever wants to continue the life in politics, whether in power or outside of it, has to be on the right side of the army within the general broader parameters that are laid out by the army. So I think competing for the parliament is also competing against each other for army's favor. So everybody will now perhaps try to one up the other. Imran Khan will say something in praise of the army, and Maryam Nawaz will say something else, and someone else from her party will say something else. Just a series of platitudes towards the army in order to send a signal to them, but also just have a perception in public mind that they are the right ones to run the country, precisely because they support the army. So it's also public posturing for the public because when it comes to sending signals to the army, that's mostly done in private, but this is to create a public perception that they are the right ones to run the country, precisely because they are on good terms with the army.
Yes. Now, just looking at Imran Khan and the PTI and where they find themselves at this point in time, and we know that the series of jalsas that have been held, this includes the likes of Karachi, Lahore, Peshawar, and the big one, the march to Islamabad. And we've also seen Imran Khan appealing to Pakistanis living overseas, Pakistanis in the diaspora for support. and just looking at whether this is going to stop, because we'll know, obviously we'll know ahead, after the Islamabad march, as to where the situation is going, where the PTI is going, but also just your thoughts on the level of support, because the visuals tell us that Imran Khan has got massive support. The PTI has got huge support in the country.
Yeah, it does have support. So, I mean, the opposition would try to deny that, but the fact still remains that Imran Khan does have support. So, and you see, and you can see that, as you said, from the visuals of all the jalsas that he's doing, and his appeal to overseas Pakistani also is rooted in some sort of reality that overseas Pakistanis do generally tend to support Imran Khan due to his narrative about ridding the country of corruption, and making it a more independent and viable state. But I mean, but the visuals at the same time shouldn't deceive us, because Pakistan is also a very big country. I mean, it's the sixth largest country in the world in terms of population. And if Imran Khan is doing his rallies in Punjab, which is the most populous province, then of course the visuals are going to look impressive. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that the opposition cannot also have just as impressive, if not more, in terms of the public turnout for their jalsas. And as always, the proof is in the pudding. Will people vote, or will Imran Khan get enough votes to put him in majority in the parliament? That's a very different question. And I think as it stands, if the elections are free and fair, Imran Khan will not become prime minister the way he did last time, because the last time when he became prime minister in 2018, that required severe rigging on part of the Pakistani army to put Imran Khan in power. And that even required him to create a coalition, because it just wasn't enough to put him in power. So if the elections are free and fair, Imran Khan might still get elected in parliament. He might still have a role to play in opposition, but he will not become the prime minister the way he did before. So we should always be circumspect when it comes to judging his popularity. But at the same time, as you said, it is not false to say that he does have a lot of support, but perhaps not enough to put him in power again.
Yes, Jahanzeb, I know it's difficult to draw comparisons, because I'm just thinking about what had taken place in Egypt with the removal of Mohammed Morsi. But in that case, we know it was in a military coup, and it's the army that had basically taken over. And what has taken place in Pakistan has been described more as a political coup rather than a military coup. But when one looks at the popularity of Mohammed Morsi, we know he was highly popular. And I would say the same would go for Imran Khan as far as popularity go. But just looking at the people of Pakistan, and in comparison to the people in Egypt, because we see two different scenarios playing out here, where we haven't seen the people of Egypt come out in the numbers that we see the people of Pakistan. And at the end of the day, Pakistan, the people of Pakistan, when it comes to politics, are very, very astute, because these are just not local issues we're talking about. We're talking about Kashmir, which is very, very close to the heart of the people of Pakistan. We're talking about the relationship with India. We're talking about his relationship with the likes of Russia at a time when the entire Ukraine crisis is also playing out. So there are too many dynamics that one needs to consider in the aftermath of the removal of Imran Khan as the Prime Minister of Pakistan.
Yes, definitely. I mean, those are things to consider. And Imran Khan himself, the narrative that he's relying upon for public support is precisely the fact that he, when he was in office, tried to pursue an independent foreign policy, independent of the United States, by precisely going to Moscow and trying to buy cheaper oil from Russia. But the optics of his visit were a bit unhelpful, because he landed in Moscow on the eve of the invasion of Ukraine. So, I mean, that's the narrative that he has built, that he was ousted from power on the behest of the United States because he was trying to pursue an independent policy, especially a closer relationship with Russia. Having said that, that's not really based in any sort of facts. And I mean, that's his own narrative because that's how his worldview is. Of him against the world, him against all the evils that exist in the world. But having said that, I mean, international issues are important, but Pakistani voters are very rational voters, and they vote for their for reasons that are very localized. So Pakistan has a parliamentary system based on the UK system, where every constituency, has a member, has someone who runs for parliament. So the issues are always very, very localized, depending on where you are in the country, and people vote for their own rational interests, such as local infrastructure development, local job opportunities, and their rights as citizens in their own local context. So the international issues that you mentioned might be important in terms of the grander discourse, but when it comes to going to the voting booth and casting your ballot, people will not be looking at Pakistan's relations with Russia or Pakistan's stance on Kashmir, but they would be voting for someone who would be beneficial for their life circumstances where they live. So Pakistani elections are very localized, and the voters are very rational, and they're rational in the modern sense, in the sense that they vote for their own self-benefit, and they would see what the person who they are putting in parliament is able to do for them in their lives. And I think when that happens, US and Russia and India might not be that important.
Well, Jahanzeb, I must say it's been an absolute pleasure, and we do appreciate you taking time out talking to us this morning here on Salam Media. We certainly will follow developments in Pakistan with a lot of interest. But for now, please take care and all the best.
Thank you.
Jahanzeb Hussain, Pakistan journalist, this morning with us. We're going to go for a break. We come back, we'll be joined by Dr. Dick Forslund, senior economist, and we are talking about South Africa and questioning the fact that is South Africa still a preferred destination for foreign investment on the continent?